See it on there.
Niles Investment Management, founder and portfolio manager. I don't know whether we can get any more definitive clarity or make definitive decisions on tech and on a lot of the things we discussed.
How long you been doing it?
That we've been discussing.
We've been around for about 4 years. We sell on eBay.
And do you think you have a clear picture of how?
Well, we were selling on eBay. Now we're doing a lot more face to face. But we were selling a bunch on
we
eBay.
had Trump for 4 years. We know what he was focused on. It's not any different this time around. And I think the big thing is that I still feel like an equal weighted basket of stocks is the better way to go than just focus on tech. And if you go back to 2016, after the election, the S&P was up 5% from there through year end. But the sectors that led it were energy, financials, industrials that were 11%, while the S&P was up 5%. The information technology sector was just up 2%.
We started a bunch of your connectors.
So I think,
If you
and
do
by the way,
still have that problem, you
technology
should
sector had been up
just
about
bring it by. I'll
10%
swap a
coming
board
into the
out for you.
election. So
you got lifetime
we know
warranty,
where
so
President Trump's focus is going to be, and I think
it
an
might
equal
be a
weighted
bad
basket
click
of
at that point,
stocks makes the
but I
most
doubt
sense.
it.
Within tech,
And we changed the
obviously
balance
you
and
have to think
everything,
about
but
some of the
I
companies
doubt that that's
differently.
your problem.
I think with Elon involved going forward, things like crypto or AI are going to get a lot more focus. So names like NVIDIA and less regulation, which will help things like Google potentially not getting broken up, obviously should benefit Tesla as they get treated more fairly relative to the unionized big three Detroit automakers. And so I think those are names that you think about and say, that could be a lot more interesting going forward than it was in the past.
What about the I don't know, lack of a better term, the mercurial nature of some of the decisions that it seemed like even the first time around that President Trump would make. Some of it at times it even seemed almost personal against CEOs or owners of certain companies. Do you need to take that into account? Do you think he'll, I don't know, some of the criticism that he may have received, will that be different this time around? Do you think he's learned from the his first stint as president?
Well, I mean, I think Trump is Trump. He's going to do what he's going to do. I think the great thing about this administration, which we didn't have the last time, is you have one of the brightest minds of our era who's really been able to change multiple industries. Space, healthcare with Neuralink, obviously EV, and who's very efficient at running these companies involved. And I think having business people being much more involved in the actual way to make the U.S. better in areas like technology and competitiveness against other countries, where other countries are trying to support their biggest companies. In the U.S. over the prior administration, unfortunately, big was bad, and there was more regulations or attempts to break them up, like in the case of Google, and that puts the U.S. at a competitive disadvantage against other countries. And so, for me, I feel like Trump learning that, hey, we want more business people potentially involved with this to help figure out how to solve some of these problems is a good thing. And so I think maybe that's one of the things that was picked up.
Wall Street digesting President-elect Trump's win earlier this week and considering what it could mean for taxes, regulation, and more. Joining us right now to talk about all of that, Jay Clayton, former SEC chairman under President Trump. He's now independent chair at Apollo and a CNBC contributor. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I think we're all trying to make sense of where all of this goes next and sort of the various permutations it would take. You saw a great debate happening between Vivek and Anthony Scaramucci on the immigration front. I want to go to the tax front and try to understand where you think that moves beyond, if you believe it moves to creating a permanent state around our current tax structure, but whether you think things like tips and a lot of the things that were promised during the campaign, whether you think that actually happens, especially because I do think there's some anxiety in the bond market about just what our debt and deficits are going to look like, and so how that all works.
Well, sure, and we all know taxes run the table.
Yep.
Because the current tax program expires, so we're gonna have to deal with that, particularly for earned income. But let me take a step back a little bit on this. Tax policy is part of economic policy, and I think something that we should recognize that's going on here is a shift in the type of personnel that are gonna come in to go. That debate that I saw, which was a very good debate, you have to remember that virtually everyone that was appointed by the Biden-Harris administration had no business experience, had no understanding practically of how the economy actually works. So when we look at the tax code and the adjustments that are being made to the tax code, I do hope that there's a lot of input from the business community, as well as the political community. What is the most effective rate for getting revenue? Those are the things that we should be looking at.
Those are real questions.
Those are the real questions.
And so then, therefore, the question is, you heard a lot of promises during the campaign. And there's some talk about peeling some of those things back, because maybe if you get some business people in, they're going to say, well, that one's a good one, but actually that is going to create a problem.
And look, I think let's start with an easy one, which is tax on corporation tax.
Right.
I don't think you can find anyone who thinks that raising that tax is going to increase revenue meaningfully. In fact, I'm in the camp.
Yes, they do.
Hurt revenue.
So we talked to Steve Mnuchin yesterday, and he said, look, he'd love to go down to that 15% number that he wished he could have gotten down to the first time around.
Okay, well,
does
let
that
me
make
get it.
sense? And then the question is,
Let me get it.
drive more revenue ultimately in all these other ways. I don't know whether that.
I think it's your case to make 15% increase revenue across receipts. Whether it's 15 or 20,
That one
but I
find
know it
something
should be.
all day, every day to come down here for.
It really hurts U.S. competitiveness, and it really hurts.
I don't think that's on the table at all.
Yeah, it was on the table.
Come
It was on
walk
the
past
table,
her
and then
mom,
you
pulling
don't
me.
get people
I want juice.
This is silly.
That's what I'm saying. It's a, but I think
Money
that's
right there.
Yeah.
I want you to get my juice.
One of the questions I was going to ask you was a personnel question. I think there's questions about the role that RFK might have in this new administration. Does he go through a confirmation process? Is he an outside advisor? There's lots of questions about the Elon Musks of the world, who I think would be part of this efficiency group, if not run it. Is there going to be a realignment of how business people are involved or not involved in this administration, and the various conflicts of interest and other things that people are going to invariably raise flags about?
Sure, that is going to come up, and look, we need to have people who understand our markets in the positions of regulating our markets. The idea that you can have somebody who has had an academic-only career come in and be an effective regulator is fanciful. Now, should we have academics in the mix? Of course we should.
Right.
But we need to have people like that. And two things on this. Our ethics rules are very important, but they shouldn't be preclusive of people who have experience. They have been used to preclude people who have experience. We need to take a pause on that.
And so what does that mean, though? Because people are going to say, like, there's a chance that, the president could waive a conflicts issue, for example, for Elon Musk. And it may be great in many ways for Elon Musk to be part of the administration and do many of the things that we talked about doing. But at the same time, if there are questions in the public sphere about whether he's going to also be a beneficiary economically himself as a result of those things, that also therefore undermines
the richest man in the
the
world.
trust in democracy
Okay,
issue.
what else?
Actually, I think is a
Come on.
it's actually a question of trust in the system.
How you gonna
I think
benefit?
it's one of the reasons that
Already he's super rich. He already the richest.
and won the election is because there's a large group of people in this country
It's
who
crazy.
don't believe in that they could trust the system on the other side.
I
And
think
so
Tu- I
how
think
do you
Tu-
bring everybody
I
together?
think Tuesday night
That fellow can only dream of having the money that he has.
Oh my goodness, his money is.
policy discussion.
He could pay $1 million a person to
to
vote. Come on, per person. It don't matter how many people do it.
Transparency and the like, we should have them, but they should
That's
not
crazy.
preclude us
You got money,
from
you
having
pay $1 million
like
a
Elon Musk,
person.
who has demonstrated incredible competence, including across media and transparency. In the mix.
When Jared was here, they were talking about I'm sure Elon, when Kamala wins, I'm sure Elon would want to work for her too as an American. And I finally said, when we were on our friend, I said, Barry, you don't need to have to beg Elon to work for Kamala. You could just vote for Trump and get Elon along with it. He's already on that team. You don't have to have this. And I said, actually, I said, you don't have to twist yourself in a pretzel to get where Elon can. But it was weird because they were. I think the other side was jealous that Elon threw his lot in, obviously. But I think it had a lot to do with Trump winning.
Sure, but that's a political issue. I'm talking about the credibility of the
I
political
think a lot of
system
people
and trying to have
win
the
a lot of
country
money betting
feel
on
really
Trump
good
to
about
win.
all aspects of it.
Yeah,
And
they,
here's
you
where
know, they had the app that
we
you can
have
bet
a lot of
on.
conversations, and I've been outspoken about.
But
the
I
fact
was,
that
my wife
look
said, you
at,
should bet for Trump. I said, I don't know, because they like to play games. They go for winning every state and still lose. where they be playing games, you don't
Some of
know.
them will say that, they're going
couldn't
trust, or
risk
they
it.
had nothing to do with it, or this or that, and all sorts of things. But invariably, the country, people in the
You see
country,
how fast she caught up? She caught up and she was down 100 and something points. How you catch up from 100 points down?
Because it undermines
Got 100 points down and she ended up a couple points losing. Yeah,
My
right.
question is, how can we have, and I think there's
I
there's
think
ways to
it
do
ended
it.
up to like 224,
Somebody who's as
290.
great as Elon
That's what I'm
may
saying.
be,
She wasn't even,
and
if you look at when it came on, he had every state.
some of these things,
And
but also do it in a way
she didn't
where
have nothing and she cut all the way up. So that was crazy.
that other people are enriching themselves.
I guess if they gotta make it look
This is a
good,
challenge that we should take.
because obviously she lost
We should
by a
say,
lot.
if Elon Musk wants to spend, 20% of his bandwidth making the country better, we should figure out how.
Don't nobody want her, nothing.
Yeah, it was good. This time he won that popular vote, so it said that
Amazon early holiday deals are key.
everybody voted. This time it wasn't, you can't say
With everything you need to kick off
it was
the
an accident.
shop
But you
Amazon.
know,
Probably didn't try to say they found mysteriously some votes
It's now on the
overnight.
market, it's Tom Lane.
You know, they,
Fund Strat, Global Advisors.
as Americans, we like the bad guy anyway. So
Yeah,
once
Elizabeth
you
is
gave him
on
30, 40
Andy
minutes, he
said,
won
CNBC
anyway.
Contributor.
Once you make him a bad guy, he's gonna win.
Post-election,
But the crazy part is, you can't be a felon and vote, but you can be a president. You can be a president.
Yeah.
Because you know he's actually a felon too. So
Are you saying you didn't? Maybe you didn't say
That's
it in
crazy.
the word, but you said it.
Yes, I'd say that.
couldn't vote for him, but you can
replace
be
more
president. Be the
what
president.
the betting markets were pointed to, and so, and we,
Okay, so I cleaned up.
when we look at like
A lot of you're not starting. You're not starting over time. What happens? It gets hot and they lift your pads lift up. Yes.
So 1,500 points from me out of the gate. More to come, or are we're already there?
I think we need to respect this move. I mean, there was a tremendous rally post-election, and it continued yesterday. I think it really does reflect a lot of
Yeah.
money was taken from
A lot over the years, your pads start to lift up.
Now, we know that because of policies,
That causes that problem. So when it heats up,
animal spirits that
your pads are lifting off
benefit things like
lifting off your
small
board.
caps and regional banks and financials. So
So I'm
I
going
think
over
there's
all
still
your
a lot of upside. It needs
all
to
your,
stay
my wife did like 10 kids. Not here today. They had 5 or 6 here today.
What's the opportunity set in your mind?
Well, since 1987,
Right.
small caps traded on a median PE basis at a premium to the S&P. The S&P is at 7.
I ain't worried about
So I
nothing
think
but my
small
cheap
caps
gas.
trade in the next
Cheap gas?
outperformed by more than
My wife.
What do you think was going to matter?
What you want?
I think
The keys.
created
For what?
level of, talking about the bond market, what that might be saying, what you think has happened with gold. The vigilante is going to be this.
Yeah, like, I didn't know you had company.
No, she know. She you don't know what
As
she just.
James Carville famously said, the bond market is, everyone's scared of the bond market. So that is something we need to watch, but we've had plenty of periods where stocks have risen with bonds rising. And I kind of agree with Powell's assessment that it's not yields have gone up not because of inflation, but because there's sort of a change in growth
Probably bringing the
expectations.
kids.
I thought that a sweep was for either party was.
So these are the different needles?
Frightening.
Yeah, you can put red needles if you want, since you're going red.
Why is it more frightening? And maybe the sweep the other way would be a little more frightening. So.
You can take a look.
I mean, I think part of the reason
Like my
investors are
agency.
getting so
Which one you taking, babe?
President Trump is entering office again, at this time with a lot more knowledge of how to build a cabinet and a team, and so in some ways this would end up being more market friendly, and I think that's why investors are becoming optimistic. I mean, I kind of agree with the idea that there are animal spirits growing.
He'll never be deficit friendly. Will he? I mean, he will be deficit friendly. He won't be, if we cut taxes on tips, Social Security, overtime,
You ain't gonna get
remove the salt cap, extend the tax cuts.
I mean, heck,
You do all those
it's
things.
your truck,
that
that mama's truck.
seems like
That ain't how it works. That's not how it works.
Oh, I just told her last night I was gonna get it fixed.
Yeah.
It's been giving me trouble for over a year.
The cluster?
Yeah.
She just kept dealing with it.
The liabilities, which
Yeah.
Then it got to where he started doing it more and more and more, and I was like,
by the end of this year, or
and the problem thing is, with that truck,
before the end of the year.
if my cluster ain't working,
or
I
next
can't
year,
turn
year
my
I
I can't hit the switch for my transmission. Like if I'm towing something, it won't let my transmission switch.
Really?
Yeah, because the cluster ain't
A
working.
lot of upside from your guess.
It's like it has to have that,
end of next year.
I guess that
Well,
spark to
you
it
know,
or
you're
whatever.
5 to 10% is
More
probably the
by
base
the-
case, just because that's the type of rally post-election and with the double spread and under the normal seasonals.
Is that the right move right now?
That mo, ain't that for the, they did that with the Blue Death. We had a Mercedes. My wife, man, I drove it to California. It was limp mode through the whole mountains.
That's what I was gonna ask you, does the gauge cluster got anything to do with that, or is that something else?
Markets and
What, is the cluster off when it's doing that?
No, it's like I'll be going down the road and it's mostly like if you got your throttle at a certain,
They move so fast.
your foot at a certain thing on your gas, and for a long period of time, then it will go into limp.
Well above.
It happens more on the, because I got my throttle body, I drive by wire,
No
not
recession.
the one with
No
cable.
recession. And
Like the 5.3's got cable.
What do you say, 60, what,
6.0's got
I think
the wire.
past like 6,700.
No.
Sometime next
Some people
67.
say it could be
Yeah,
the
sometime
throttle
next year,
body,
because
some people say
Mine's
it
the
could be a
20%.
wiring from the throttle body
Yeah, it's, well,
to.
maybe 10, 15. Yeah, because margin.
I've been dealing with that since I've had a truck, and I've had a truck for 5 years.
And the
Yeah,
stock
put that
market's
in.
up, so we
I got a guy, a customer, I just done his work for. He does everything for your truck. Matter of fact, I put him on the page. He has the white Tahoe.
You're pretty bullish.
He up in the he throws Chattanooga.
I think I'm
He
pretty positive.
so he had he put that 5.3 in there.
Fundamentals, yeah.
You look on there.
I think I've seen that video. I went through a lot of your videos.
He's serious. Him and his dad, they said they out there, they building from ground up. He's showing frames.
Helping millions of people to invest in a brighter
He
future
can get you working.
Explore the
He's at one shop, they
opportunity
work
at
on the weekend.
JamesHenderson.com.
Might have
And join us
information when I
now,
send it to you.
Roger Ferguson. I'm going to take it in a completely different direction. I think Roger, just trying to figure out whether the quarter point is likely to in hindsight, to look like the right move, whether there's
All right, I
subsequent
cleaned up all your,
cuts, or whether we're headed higher. And the whole idea of trying to handicap it, we got to figure out.
So that should stop that. Let
Along
me
with
know.
proposals, how does it fit into?
I don't know, cause it ain't happening right now. And
You say it ain't, but.
That's like going to the doctor. You know, like going to the doctor, you're always sick until you get there, then everything works fine.
Yeah.
Maybe inflation could continue from tariffs, but I could see us maybe continuing to lower rates.
Okay.
If Elon Musk comes in and puts the brakes on a lot of government and government spending. Is it a hard time to handicap things, Roger?
Yeah, I think it is actually, and I think Chairman Powell handled it very well. He said effectively, it is a wait and see. We have to see exactly what the policies are. And then he said that what they would do is what you'd expect them to do, which is to put it into their model, which is the best of the U.S. economy, and then make decisions. But I think he certainly is open to the possibility that modeling, once we know what the policies are, And with that
Or is
mixture
that the one that wasn't
could lead to either thing. I
No,
think it's
they-
too
they're the-
early
they're-
to
they're
say
the
one
ones
or
that
the
put
other.
in that,
But I think you're right.
it just went out.
It is going to be
The
important to see
price wasn't-
exactly what the policy mix is.
lights.
And then, as he says, they don't guess, they don't speculate, but they will decide once they have a better sense of the policy mix.
Well, in kind of a perverse way, Roger, the jumbo cut of 50 basis points caused conditions to tighten. Mortgage rates have gone back. The 10-year has done nothing but go up in yield since then. It almost was, what they were trying to orchestrate, almost the reverse happened. Yet the market continues to hit new highs, and the wealth effect is on full display. So, I don't. Should we change what the neutral rate is right now, given what's happened with the 10-year?
Look, I think the question with the neutral rate is very much going to come into play. As you know, I thought the first move should have been 25 basis points. It was interesting that Chair Powell pushed back pretty hard on the thought that
Well, you're taking them out of
the
the
shape of the
seat.
yield curve and the level at the 10 of the 3rd year was suggesting a loss of confidence around the inflation fighting question and
Yeah, these are,
rise in inflation expectations. But what he also said I
Super
found
bright
really interesting
LEDs.
is, a certain kind
These are
of
different brightness.
caution about exactly the pace at which they are going to continue to cut rates. And he was clear that they're moving away from sentences that he perceived to be giving forward guidance. So I think to your point, Joe, while he's pushing back on the thought that there's
say the right
diversity in
side
the
like this?
markets and that inflation expectations
I
are
don't know exactly
maybe
what
a
the
little
brand was.
loosened.
So they look about
I
like
certainly
that.
heard in his voice.
You know, on
saying
that
that
truck,
they
they
will
just
take
pop
this
in,
one
when you
year
got
at a
solder
time.
and all
And
that.
What you got, a
he said very
99 though,
explicitly,
too?
They're not
Or
going to
yours?
pilot
Yeah, I got a
inflation
91
effect.
at 10
Okay.
and an 86 Well,
It was only
Yeah,
one
these are
day,
for
Roger,
90.
I don't know
You
how
gotta
much you
square
can
by
read
it.
into the
You're
reaction
not
to
worth a lot of money.
the election
The older it get for some reason.
Yeah, 86.
Which
Yeah, they
seemed
the
odd
older
if
it
it's
get,
gonna be inflation.
everybody come by. I paid 12,000 for it. I paid 20,000 for it. Man,
To say
It's
a
going up in price.
highly deregulatory
But,
environment
these are for
could
that
be
those years.
disinflationary or even
Yeah.
deflationary,
So they get
and
the older
maybe
get, the
either
more money's
at
worth.
least
I got a 64
some of the
C10.
tariffs that
Really?
they are put on,
My mom
maybe
has a
if they won't even be
67.
some of them.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's
I got
like-
So we all got an old video.
Yeah.
It's, that we are going to see highly inflationary policies.
But these
They-
are for the older ones.
Talk about Elon Musk and the Department of
But
Government
they're so much
Efficiency.
brighter. I like
That
to
will
take them
probably
apart
not be
and solder them
inflationary.
in.
That could be deflationary as well.
Well, what I found interesting in the reporting is, some members of Congress, apparently in the Republican Party, are thinking about how to, pull back from some of President-elect Trump's promises around taxes. Look, I think, what happened with regulation, very uncertain, as you say, it could be, pro-growth or not.
I think I just
We'll see
like
how it goes.
red
There's a
because
reason why we have,
I like
regulation
skulls.
to protect
Uh-huh.
consumers, et cetera.
So in
The
the
question
me,
of
the
tariffs is a
skull
much
with the
more
red eyes.
question than most people think. It depends very much on, how much is
And
passed
of course,
through, whether or not profit
I got
margins go
stickers on
down.
the back of my truck,
Tariffs
and they're
are,
red.
a one-time change in
It's gonna
price
look good.
levels.
I'll
They
put
may
red
or
in
may
the
not be
info, too.
inflationary. But we've also seen a period in history when tariffs and retaliatory tariffs led to recession and some people think a global depression. The final point to make is, an expectation of increased debt and deficit we all need to worry about. Chair Powell responded, I think, appropriately that
So you
at
do
this
more than
stage,
just
the
shovel
debt
down.
looks like it's manageable. But the
I,
trajectory and
where's
increase in
the
deficits,
forward?
I think, has got to be something worse than
Well, no,
everybody.
we
So
sell
overall,
everything,
Joe,
but
I
we
think,
specialize in
it's
repairing
a
the
fraught
Chevy.
time in terms
Like
of
I plug it to the
policy.
board.
It
I'm
can
waiting
go either
for
way, and,
a
we'll have
bossy
to wait and
in
see exactly
Jonesboro
what the first moves are,
to send me
and
the
then
other
what the
ones.
second and third moves are when it comes to tariffs.
When you send me the Fords, I'll be
One
doing
piece of
Fords
this,
too.
though,
When you
is
send me
the
the
energy
Ford
complex,
plug-in.
and when I say energy complex, there's oil and gas on one end, LNG and the like, and then there's also, you're looking at some of these solar and wind companies, by the way, they're getting slammed from an equity perspective, and I don't know if I imagine there's going to have to be a lot of M&A in that space, just given how maybe some of those companies could struggle if they don't have some of the benefits and tax benefits and the like. But on the oil and gas piece, we had a CEO of Exxon on Karen Woods last week, and there is this you know, there is a market, you know, in terms of what they want the price of gas to be. They don't want the price of gas to go too low. It's very important, I would think, from an inflationary perspective, if the idea is that you need to offset the tariffs or the inflation effects of tariffs with lower gas prices. Do you think they're going to be able to
Yeah, that'd
get
be a
those
winner.
gas prices?
You know, I'm from California, and
Look, as you know, the price
I went
of
out
oil
there,
is a global price.
was it
It depends
in
on
April or
lots of
something? I was
things.
out there in
The
April.
advantage right now of
Man,
being energy
I finally got there and went to the gas station. I was hell of a tech.
uncertainties around supply.
Gas, $5
I think we have
a
a little
gallon.
more chance of controlling the price of energy in this country because it's at this stage purely a domestic question.
A gallon.
By geopolitics. But you put your finger on another
Man.
really important point, and
Right,
it's
ain't
so
more
just
than that.
depends on, you know, profit margins.
It's so crazy how the
and
same
whether
product is
businesses,
worth
if there are
so
tariffs
much
or if
because
there
it's more,
is
way more
an increase
expensive in
input
different areas.
costs, their ability to pass
Nothing
those
changed but
along.
me driving down the
What
highway.
we saw in the most recent bout of
You
inflation
literally watch
is
the
that for
gas
some
go up.
things, those companies, consumer goods companies, had to unwind those efforts to pass along price increases.
Thing is, I mean,
So,
the ones
there's,
like right there, you know, by the interstate is high, but if you go
there
to
may
a
be, if you point out
mom
some
and pop
some
store
movements
down
in
country
profit
road, their
margins or in
gas is
certain
gonna be
goods and
cheaper.
commodities that will offset inflationary
Mhm.
pressures in other places.
Happy birthday, Marty. Oh, no, you don't. Let me get this. Ah, thanks. You're too kind. I've heard that.
Unlimited 2% cash back. The Wells Fargo Active Cash Credit Card.
Yeah.
Overnight, China announced $1.4 trillion in stimulus over 5 years. Eunice,
Maybe
you
I ain't gotta buy that no more.
now, we said we were going to go to China and actually see the stimulus package. Do you have it right there with you, Eunice?
Yeah, that's right, Joe.
Yeah, a friend of mine, he has a mud truck.
Uh-huh.
You know, you take out there in the mud, playing around and all that stuff. He had a blown motor with a belt, and he had to use that racing, or the racing gas. And it was like $8-10 a gallon.
A gallon?
Hidden debt. So this is off-balance sheet
Yeah,
debt, debt that hasn't been recognized, which has been a primary source
That
of risk
is amazing.
in this economy.
That's why you own your business.
That is
Special bonds
amazing.
over 5 years to raise more funds.
I mean, this is like his
This
belt
purpose.
for the
The
blower
finance
motor.
minister,
Uh-huh.
signaled that
His belt
Trump
was
would
$300.
be open to the
The
idea
belt.
of expanding
Yeah.
its a fiscal
It
deficit
went
next
through
year,
two
so
of them.
implying that there could be greater savings then. But so far, the stimulus
And then
that
you
we're
tried
hearing
it shortly
is
after.
going to mainly come from refinancing that debt at the local level. And so the finance minister said this would free up about $85 billion over 5 years so the local governments can spend more. But there is nothing in the plan that puts money in the hands directly of consumers or companies, therefore stimulating demand. And that's one of the reasons why you saw the stock selling off so much. All these Chinese ETFs in free market, as well as Alibaba and others.
A lot of stimulus. We stimulated ourselves a little yesterday with Jay Powell and another quarter point, or this week. I don't know what that does. It's a time that I think is fraught with uncertainty. We always say that more than usual. Can you update us on what kind of relationship we're going to see between the president-elect and President Xi? That's a weird when Trump has said very, like, sort of complimentary things about Xi, how smart he is, and how he exerts,
Right.
kind of scary when he says that he admires the way someone exerts that much control over so many people. But you got the Taiwan issue, and we want to onshore a lot of stuff. It's just you must be. Can you sleep at night? There's a lot for you to be thinking about.
Well, there's definitely a lot of uncertainty, and there have been several research houses that expected that this stimulus plan could even be bigger than what the policymakers originally wanted. Nomura had said that it could be 10 to 20% larger than expectations. We don't know whether or not that's going to come to fore because we are still waiting to see if anything else is announced. But in terms of the relationship between Xi Jinping and President-elect Trump, as you said, One thing you mentioned, tariffs. So President-elect Trump had said that he would hit China with 60% tariffs. That would be very disruptive to the economy, something that China would not
now
want
when
to
it
see,
went off,
especially at this time when they have a jobs
or is
problem.
it just like you hit
capacity
something and it goes
in
off?
several different
It varies.
At the same
You
time,
hit something, you can be sitting at a
President
red
Trump
light.
has
You just go
signaled
walk.
to Xi Jinping
Yeah.
that
Sometimes
he
when I
could
crank up my
potentially
truck,
do
it don't even
things
wanna come
that the Chinese would welcome,
Yes, right.
such as a softer approach with Russia's Putin, for example, which is a chief ally of China,
break that
maybe a
wire.
weaker position on Taiwan. Which also Beijing would
You're right.
appreciate. And then President-elect Trump has expressed contempt for the allies. So in that way, China could potentially benefit from a lack of coordination and this coordinated front that they are seeing for their trade practices, especially on, say, EVs, for example.
90 years ago, James Henderson began investing on behalf of our first client, Alexander Henderson. Today, we're helping millions of people to invest in a brighter future together. Explore the opportunity at JanusHenderson.com.
Let's bring in now Double Line Capital CEO and CIO Jeffrey Gunlock.
can buy a
Jeffrey,
house with how
welcome
much
back
the
for our
battery
traditional
costs.
visit.
Hey, Judge, good to be here again.
It's good to have you. So what is your reaction to what the Fed chair had to say today? He used a couple of R words, the one we talked about last time, recalibration, and then remarkable, he said, when describing the resiliency of this economy.
Yeah, recalibration showed up again, and that's a repeat of the last.
Didn't you just ask me about signals? You want the signals to be red
And I
too?
think Powell feels
Yes.
very much
You want
in
red
a different
signals?
place now,
That's fine, yeah.
because since the July 31st meeting,
Make sure I got you.
we have the 2-year Treasury rate is up by almost 60 basis points, and the Fed funds rate is now down by 75 basis
Everything
points.
look good.
So he's gotten much more in
Do it more than I ever gonna do it.
Fed funds rate in 2 years of 135 basis points of convergence.
I literally Googled it and then I was like, oh crap, they gotta be solid, never mind.
I really think.
Yeah, it's different than
So
that.
We have one more rate cut coming in
It's
December.
definitely different than
that would
the,
chew up the Fed funds rate,
ones
exactly
before.
where the 2-year Treasury rate is right now. So it is interesting that we've had such a strong performance of the stock market since the last Fed meeting, while we've had interest rates rising. So you've had a tremendous outperformance of stocks versus at least Treasury bonds since the last Fed meeting, and I attribute that basically to the election result. So we had an incredibly consequential election result, very different than a lot of people probably were forecasting as a base case a few months back. And we've had one of the least consequential Fed meetings today, with basically a repetition of this idea that the goals are normalizing, the labor market's normalizing, the quits rate and job openings rates are kind of where they were pre-pandemic. And so I think the Fed is feeling very much that they are plodding along towards their goals, and he said so in really direct language today. So yeah, the thing that's sort of surprising me a little bit is that people are so willing to dismiss the softening jobs market. I mean, the 12,000 jobs, I know people want to attribute that to one-off hurricanes, strikes, and stuff like that. But I keep looking at the household survey, and the household survey over the last 11 months has been a loss of jobs, of over 300,000 jobs cumulatively over the last 11 months. And so that typically is a little bit more real time at economic turning points. It's still not terrible, the household survey. It's very volatile, so we have to watch out for that. But it is not showing tremendous signs of strength, and the real problem that the bond market seems to be having, from my perspective, and it's being talked about much more in the open, it came up several times at the press conference today, is that the supply of Treasury bonds is getting to be rather astonishing. We have a $2 trillion deficit. It's about 6% of GDP over the last 12 months, and we still have a growing economy. And the interest expense on the debt, which I always talk about, 3 years ago was $300 billion per year. It's now $1.3 trillion per year, and we have a great volume of bonds that are rolling off with very low interest rates from 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago. They are being refinanced at substantially higher rate levels, and this is going to continue to be a supply problem for the bond market. And for this reason, we are not positive on long-term treasury bonds. In spite of the fact the economy is sort of gradually slowing down, it's just the supply of bonds is very troubling. And so we recommend investors stay in the intermediate part of the treasury bond market and not out in the 20 and 30-year bond sector. In fact, when we're at the low in rates, that basically several weeks ago, we made another duration cut, or maturity cut, in many of our bond funds because we do not want to be exposed to this fiscal financing problem, which I think could very well lead to rising interest rates in spite of the fact that we might have a slowing economy. So interest rates are rising. We have the curve is not inverted anymore, 2s to 10s. It's not very positively slow. It's very
You gotta have real patience.
We're anticipating
With this.
that we'll cut rates again in December. So
Yeah,
not a lot to take
over
away
and
from
over and
today's
over, you
meeting.
kind of get an
Pretty much a
idea what
repeat
goes wrong.
of the comments that were made by Jay Powell at the last meeting. But I do think that he is much more in line with the bond market, and he is correct in exuding the idea that he's in a normalized sort of place, and that he's making progress towards the mandate. The inflation numbers are lower.
So we're gonna change the ones that I can see mainly.
2.7. There are some inflation
Like I can see your gas, I can see
we
your
believe that if you keep the price of oil around the low 70s, we spend a lot of
battery.
resistance on it.
Your battery's red.
We think we're going to
So
see
your red battery,
potentially
but
a headline
you
CPI
already red.
below 2% in about 4 or 5 months, based upon the structure
So
of the
the
sales.
gas.
Jay Powell will be able to
Here,
pretty much
here.
declare a victory. I also commend Jay Powell for bringing up the
Become
lags
red.
on the rent rolls. Part of the inflation rate remains elevated.
Yes, little girl.
The rent rolls, the new rents have almost no inflation, but the old ones, they come down with a lag.
Yeah,
So that part of the
Can I help you?
inflation picture is probably still going to provide something of a
whatever you think
a
looks
ceiling
good.
on where the inflation rate's going to be for 2025.
Say they
I
all
would
look
think, under the base case, we'll see a 3-handle CPI inflation
Don't
rate
give you no pink
during
lights.
the next 12 months.
Jay left.
There. You think leaving some of them orange, we can leave some of them orange.
Okay.
Change that color a little bit. What you think looks good? Be glad it just have lights.
We'll go red with your check engine and then so we go red here and red there. Since the other one's got a red. Go red with your check engine. Jayla. Oh, the phone is somebody's name. That's what I'm looking at. Jayla, where the iPad at? Huh? Let me see the iPad. Let me see. Why you turning? Why you turn your Wi-Fi off? Huh? You did turn your Wi-Fi off. You did turn your Wi-Fi off. Here.
Olive Garden's never-ending pasta bowl is back. Now with our new garlic herb sauce, which means the never-ending pasta you crave isn't just back, it's better than ever.
Not right on my
Never-ending
wall.
pasta bowl, starting at $13.99 for a limited time.
Let's talk about what could be in store for the big tech stocks once President Trump takes office. Joining us now is Dan Miles Investment Management, founder and portfolio manager. I don't know whether we can get any more
No,
definitive
so
clarity or
you
make
know, we
definitive
downloaded the
decisions on tech
Remote
and
Control.
on a lot of the things we discuss that we've been
The,
discussing in
that's a
earnest,
Fire
since
Stick
we
TV.
found out the results
So
of
you download
Tuesday's
the Fire
election.
Stick
Dan,
Remote
do you
Control.
think
You know,
you
most TVs now you can
clear
download the Remote
picture
Control, the app.
of how it's going to play
So
out?
because I use that,
I mean,
I got
the
it
great news,
on
Joe,
my
is that we've already had this before.
because I
We
use it. I
had
have it
Trump
on
for
my
4 years.
iPad
You
and on
know
my
what he
phone.
was focused
But the
on.
phone
It's
is
not
right
any
here.
different this time around.
Sometimes she can
And I
turn it
think
off
the
because
big
she's on
thing
my
is
phone
that
because
I
she's on
still
my
feel
iPad.
like an
But
equal
she didn't
weighted
do it that
basket of
time.
stocks is the better way to go.
I got
Let's
my
focus
friend
on
phone.
tech. And if you go back to
Well,
2016,
he's my boss too. I got
the
his
election,
the company
S&P
phone,
was up 5% from
and
there through year
he
end.
said,
But
"Are you letting the
sectors
kids play with the
more
phone?"
energy,
I said, "Why?" He said,
financials,
"My garage keep going up and down and up and down." He said, "I
while
left the
S&P
house
was up 5.
and then I walked away, my garage
Information
went down."
technology
He said,
sector
"I went to the
was just
store,
up
my garage up." I
And
said,
so
"What?"
I think,
So that's good to
and
tell
by the
me.
way, the information technology sector has been up
He
about
said, "I didn't know
10%
what was
coming into
going
the
on. I'm trying to figure out. I
So,
close it, it opens. I
where
close it,
do
it
you think
opens."
Trump's focus is going to
I
be?
said,
And I
"Man,
think an equal weighted basket of stocks makes the
you
most
gotta
sense.
close that app because
Within
they
tech,
playing with
obviously,
my
you're thinking about
garage."
some of the companies differently. I think with Elon
That's
involved
crazy.
going forward, things like crypto
At least you
or
said
AI are
something.
going to get a
I
lot
had
more
no
focus. So
clue that
things
that was
like
even doing that.
NVIDIA,
No clue.
and less regulation, which will help things like Google potentially not getting broken up. Obviously, it should benefit Tesla as they get treated more fairly relative to the unionized big three Detroit automakers. And so I think those are names that you think about and say, that could be a lot more interesting going forward than it was in the past.
What about the I don't know, lack of a better term, the mercurial nature of some of the decisions that it seemed like even the first time around that President Trump would make. Some of it at times it even seemed almost personal against CEOs or owners of certain companies. Do you need to take that into account? Do you think he'll, I don't know, some of the criticism that he may have received, will that be different this time around? Do you think he's learned from the his first stint as president?
Well, I mean, I think Trump is Trump. He's going to do what he's going to do. I think the great thing about this administration, which we didn't have the last time, is you have one of the brightest minds of our era who's really been able to change multiple industries. Space, healthcare with Neuralink, obviously EV, and who's very efficient at running these companies involved. And I think having business people being much more involved in the actual way to make the U.S. better in areas like technology and competitiveness against other countries, where other countries are trying to support their biggest companies. In the U.S., over the prior administration, unfortunately, big was bad, and there was more regulations or attempts to break them up, like in the case of Google, and that puts the U.S. at a competitive disadvantage against other countries. And so, for me, I feel like Trump learning that, hey, we want more business people potentially involved with this to help figure out how to solve some of these problems is a good thing. And so I think maybe that's one of the things that was picked up.
This did not happen overnight. This was not luck. This was years of meticulous planning and sacrifice. Now is not the time to make wasteful. Now is not the time to cut corners. You need a partner who truly understands you, who respects your time and your investment, who puts your safety above all else. Now is the time to make the right choice. Now is the time for Philly exclusive.
Wall Street digesting Trump's win earlier this week and considering what it could mean for taxes, regulation, and more to us right now to talk about all of that.
Install. But that don't happen a lot.
Independent chair, Apollo, and the CNBC contributor. Good morning to you.
It's like LED bulbs that you buy for your house. It's gonna last so many hours and all this stuff.
Various permutations.
They quit working like 3 months later.
That is so crazy to me.
On the immigration front, I want to go to the tax front and try to
That thing
understand
is built
where
to
do you think
last
that
anymore.
moves,
Now that was Ford built
beyond
to
if it
live,
even
built
moves,
tough. Ford tough.
to creating a permanent state around our current tax structure, but whether you think things like tips and a lot of the things that were promised during the campaign, I don't think that actually happens, especially because I do think there's some anxiety in the
They
bond
get people like bragging about certain lights and all that. And this is better than that one. And it all at the end of the day came from China.
Current tax.
How you got it here? It came from China.
You know, earned income.
So if it's good,
Let me
it's
take a
good.
step
If
back
it's
on
bad,
this.
it's bad.
Tax policy is part of economic policy.
Change it.
And I think something that we should recognize that's going on here is a shift in the type of personnel that are going to come in to go. That debate that I saw was a very good debate. You have to remember that virtually everyone that was appointed by the Biden-Harris administration had no business experience, had no understanding practically of how the economy actually works. So when we look at the tax code and the adjustments that are going to be made to the tax code, I do hope that there is a lot of input from the business community.
So what I do like about these, they don't get hot.
You know, what is the most
So like the one that was in there was super hot.
Those are the things
So
that
you
we should
don't
be
get hot
Those are
pressure.
real questions.
Those are the real questions.
And so then therefore the questions, you heard a lot of
My
promises
wife
during
didn't leave.
the
She must be slick.
There's some talk about peeling some of those things back because maybe if you get some business people, they're going to say, well, that one's a good one, but actually that's not a sanitary problem.
And look, I think let's start with an easy one.
Maybe I'm wrong, but she ain't left.
Corporation tax. I don't
Hey,
think
were you done yet?
anyone who thinks that
I don't
raising
remember
that
saying I was
tax
trying.
is going to increase revenue. In fact,
I know.
in the camp
Are you
that
done?
any raise maybe hurt revenue.
So we talked to Steve Mnuchin yesterday, and he said, look, he'd love to go down to that 15% number that he wished he could have gotten down to the first time around. Does that make sense? And then the question is, how do you will that drive more revenue ultimately in all sorts of other ways to make up for whatever that?
I think a good case can be made that the 15% number would increase revenue across.
Man, your desk was dirty.
No,
Whether it's 15 or 20,
that's normal.
what I know it should be.
That's normal. That's normal.
Really hurts the
You see the other ones around here.
Highly hurts.
I don't think that's on the table at all. But
That was on the table. It was on the table, and then you know what the American people
said, no, that's what I'm saying.
This is silly.
That's what I'm saying. But I think that's not on the table, right? One of the questions I was going to ask you was a personnel question. And I think there's questions about the role that RK might have in this new administration. Does he go through a confirmation process? Is he an outside advisor? There's lots of questions about the Elon Musks of the world, who I think would be part of this efficiency group, if not run it. Is there going to be a realignment of how business people are involved or not involved in this administration, and the various conflicts of interest and other things that people are going to invariably raise flags about?
Sure, that is going to come up. And look, we need to have people who understand our markets in the positions of regulating our markets. The idea that you can have somebody who
Red,
has
white.
an academic
Which one's in here?
come in and be an effective regulator is fanciful. Now, should we have academics in the mix? Of course we should. But we need to have things like that. And two things, guys. Our ethics rules are very important, but they shouldn't be so far of people who have experience. They have been used to preclude people who have experience.
What do you think was that?
You know,
And so what does that mean though? Because people are going to say, like, there's a chance
TikTok,
that
they
the
let me know
president
if it's
could
a
waive
no.
a conflicts issue, for example, for Elon Musk. And maybe
what looks best?
Elon Musk to be part of the administration and do many things that we talked about doing. But at the same time, if there are questions in the public sphere about whether he's going to also be a beneficiary economically himself as a result of those things, that also therefore undermines, again, this goes to the trust in democracy issue, which actually I think is a big, it's not just trust in democracy, but a trust in the system. By the way, I believe that one of the reasons that the next president of the United States is winning and won the election is because there's a lot of people in this country who don't believe in that they could trust the system on the other side.
I think Tuesday night showed that people want Elon Musk.
I have enough bread because you got your trans camps.
They voted on
They
it.
eat bread.
Let me make a point.
Man, we have
And
just
the ethics
quick,
rules,
if you
you know,
think
transparency
a couple
and
of
life
wood
should
did
happen,
white
but they should
and
not
a couple of
preclude
red.
us from having a person like Elon Musk.
Oh, you do
who
have
has
your white
demonstrated
middle, huh?
incredible competence, including across media and transparency.
They do
In the
funny
mix.
when Barry was here.
Right.
They were talking about, I'm sure Elon, you know, when Kamala wins, I'm sure Elon would want to work for her too as an American. And I finally said, you know, when we went on Friday, I said, Barry, you don't need to have to beg Elon to work for Kamala. You could just vote for Trump and get Elon along with it. He's already on that team. You don't have to have this. And I said, actually, I remember I said, you don't have to twist yourself in a pretzel
that's
to
that.
get where it.
This one is like a
Elon
darker-
But it was weird because
It's not the
they
original,
I think the other side was jealous that Elon threw his lot in, obviously. And I think it had a lot to do with Trump winning.
Sure, but that's a political issue. I'm talking about the credibility of the political system and trying to have the country feel really good about all aspects of it. And here's where I'll go with it. You know, we have lots of conversations, and I've been, I hope, outspoken about the fact that, you know, you look at various congresspeople and senators, we talked about Pelosi and others, where they're trading stocks, for example, at the same time that they're engaged or involved in these things. And some of them will say that, you know what, they're in blind trust, or they had nothing to do with it, or this or that, and all sorts of things. But invariably the country, people in the country, conspiratorial or not, say, I don't believe in this system. I think this is crazy to have people allowed to do that at the same time because it undermines the trust in the system. And part of what we're all trying to do is bring back the trust. My question is, how can we have, and I think there's ways
This
to
one
do
right
it.
here.
Somebody who's as great as Elon may be at you know, helping the government figure out some of these things, but also do it in a way where parts of the country are not taking that other people are matching themselves.
And everything you're saying is right. This is a challenge that we should take on and face head on. We should say, if Elon Musk wants to spend, you know, 20% of his bandwidth making the country better, we should figure out how to do it.
So you can do right.
After last month's massive solar flare added a 25th hour to the day, businesses are wondering what should we
I'm
do?
thinking white power now.
Anything can change the world of work. From HR to payroll, ADP designs for the next anything.
Joins now on the markets, Tom Lee, head of research at Fundstrat Global Advisors, chief investment officer at Fundstrat Capital. The list goes on and on. Andy's a CNBC contributor. First post-election appearance that we've had. You knew Trump was going to win.
Well,
Not many people did.
yes, that's,
I'll give you credit. Are you saying you didn't? Maybe you didn't say it in so many words, but you said it.
yes, I'd say that we were placing a lot more weight on what the betting markets were pointing to, and so, and we, you know, when we look at all the
You saw it in the Trump trade, and you saw it in Bitcoin, and you saw it in sectors of the market that would benefit from it.
That's right.
Presumably, but who knows, from the Trump presidency. So 1,500 points a meet out of the gate. More to come, or are we're already there?
That's better than not want to change the theme of my truck either.
There was a tremendous rally post-election. I think what really does reflect a lot of money was taken out of the market because of the uncertainty around the election. And now we know that because of policy changes and
Xavier
animal
speaking.
spirits, that this is really going to benefit things like
Hello.
Bitcoin and small caps and regional
Hello.
banks and financials. So I do think there's still a lot of upside. I mean, small caps trade at 10 times median forward earnings. I mean, that's a
So what do you think that should be? 12 times? And what's the opportunity set in your mind?
well, since 1987, small caps traded on a median PE basis at a premium to the S&P. The S&P's at 17 times. So I think small caps could, in the next couple of years, outperform by more than 100%.
And what do you think about some of the macro issues that I think create a different level of uncertainty? You talk about the bond market and what that might be saying, what you think is happening with gold.
Okay.
Are the
So
bond
you
books
could
alliance
do
is going to be this governor
either
bond
that
or
one,
anything
or
that's
you
gonna
can go
happen?
on your red. You can go white.
As James
And
Carville
on your white,
famously
you
said,
can go red.
the bond market is, everyone's scared of the bond market. So that is something we need to watch, but we've had plenty of periods where stocks have risen with bonds rising. And I kind of agree with Powell's assessment that it's not yields are dropping not because of inflation, but because there's sort of a change in growth expectations.
I thought that a sweep was, for either party, was the death knell for the markets and frightening to all involved. And now we're getting a sweep. Why is it more frightening? Maybe the sweep the other way, but it's a little more frightening for some.
Yeah.
Offset your red with
I mean,
that
I
white.
think part of the reason investors are getting somewhat optimistic is that
White, you go with your red.
President Trump is entering office again, but this time with a lot more knowledge of how to build, a cabinet and a team, and so in some
Well, I
ways
mean,
this
that would
would
be
end
easier
up
to
being
see
more
the
market
needle.
friendly, and I think that's why investors are becoming optimistic. I mean, I kind of agree with the idea that there are animal spirits growing.
He'll never be deficit friendly.
Red.
I mean, he will be deficit friendly. He won't be, I mean, if we cut taxes on tips, Social Security,
Like we got
overtime,
more white and more red.
You could either go
remove
red
the salt
here
cap,
to match, or
extend
you
the
could
tax
go white
cuts.
there.
You do all those things, that seems like
It's going to be very difficult to fix the deficit with just changes in tax and spending. But it's probably why Bitcoin is kind of interesting here, because it's potentially a treasury reserve asset, and as Bitcoin rises in price, it actually helps offset the liabilities, which is the deficit.
So you were at 150, I think, on Bitcoin, weren't you? But
Yeah.
Not necessarily by the end of this year, or
I think 6 figures is still possible before the end of the year, yeah.
and then more next year and the year after.
Yeah, I think because now, post-halving and now Bitcoin's becoming a lot more relevant, and I think maybe the regulatory overhang is diminishing, that there's a lot of upside from here, yes.
Okay, S&P, and the next year.
Well, between now and year end,
Like
5 to
that?
10%
Versus
probably the base case, just because that's the type of rally post-election, and we have a dovish Fed, and
We'll do it that way.
seasonal.
Is that the right move right now for the Fed?
I think inflation fighting
You should do it like that.
war is largely over, and the real rate is still too high. So I agree with Fed's view that we need to move towards neutral. Which
Is that how you
towards
read that?
2%. So I think it is supportive.
No, I could actually plug up to it, but that's one way I reset it.
Investment has been constrained.
Oh,
So
I just want to make sure they all work.
Oh, so what about 2000, what's that say, like 25? They move so fast, for like months now, years. So what about 2025? So about 10% more would put us well above.
Yeah, more than 6,000 before year end. I think at least for the foreseeable future,
No recession.
no recession,
And
and
people want you to answer when they ask you. So what do you say,
Stealing
60, 100 on the S&P?
I think well past like 6,700.
No,
Sometime next
6,700.
year. Yeah, sometime next year, because
That's another 20%.
yeah, it's more maybe 10, 15. Yeah, because margin debt hasn't really risen in the last 4 months, and the stock market's up. So we know investors haven't been adding risk, and now we have earnings visibility, and we have a continued dovish Fed, and this election's behind us. So multiple tailwinds exist.
You're pretty bullish.
I think I'm pretty positive on the U.S. and fundamentals, yes.
Hello, I'm Laura Cassidy
Appleton with
You
Janice.
know how some people try to put
For
flames
90
and all
years,
that, I was
we've worked to
thinking
help
about
our
trying to
clients
find
achieve
ways to
superior
put
financial
skulls in
outcomes
there.
and fulfill our
They
purpose
got
of
backgrounds
investing in a
like
brighter
that.
future together.
So you would find the background, you could probably, what you do, type in, if you get into, like I said, you have lifetime, one guy switch it out for you.
Completely different
But,
direction.
they're called gauge faces, gauge, either the gauge face, gauge overlay. Just type in,
In
skull,
hindsight, to look like the right move, but the subsequent
GMC
quarter-point
or
cuts,
Chevy gauge
were headed
overlay.
higher, and the
And
whole
then you
idea of
buy
trying to handicap
the
it, we gotta
actual
figure
paper
out,
that we're putting in there right now.
how
That paper
Trump's,
is
how
black paper.
President-elect Trump's, a lot of his proposals, how
Cause
does
you
it
see some,
fit
like, if you
into,
looked online, you see some of the
monetary
American
policy?
flag,
And it,
you see
some
all
are,
type of different
would
ones.
seem to be
And then they got
inflationary,
some, I think they're
some seem to be
etched in
recessionary,
there.
or a combination of both. So I could see us having to raise rates because maybe inflation gets rekindled from tariffs, but I could see us maybe continuing to lower rates if Elon Musk comes in and puts the brakes on
Go
a lot
tax
of
the
government. Is it a hard time to handicap things, Roger?
Yeah, I think it is actually, and I think Chairman Powell handled it very well. He said effectively, it is a wait and see. We have to see exactly what the policies are. And then he said that what they would do is what you'd expect them to do, which is to, put it into their model, which is the best of the U.S. economy, and then make decisions. But I think he certainly is open to the possibility that that modeling, once we know what the policies are and what that mixture is, could lead to either thing. I think it's too early to say one or the other, but I think you're right. It is going to be important to see exactly what the policy mix is. And then, as he says, they don't guess, they don't speculate, but they will decide once they have a better substantive policy mix.
Well, in kind of a perverse way, Roger, the jumbo cut of 50 basis points
Kind of see,
conditions the tight
dark, to really
mortgage
see
rates
it.
have gone
But
back
one
up.
of
The
these
10-year has done nothing but go up in yield since then. It almost was, what they were trying to orchestrate, almost the reverse happened, yet the market continues to hit new highs and the wealth effect is on full.
Yeah, so you see it's not going to overwhelm you, but
Look, I think the question with the neutral rate is very much going to come into play. As you know, I thought the first
you
solution
look at all
was
my
25
videos,
basis
so
points.
you get to see it on.
It was interesting
you
that
see
Chairman
the
Powell
deal.
pushed back pretty hard on the thought that the shape of the yield curve and the level of the 10 and the 30 year was suggesting a loss of confidence around the inflation fighting question and a rise in expectations.
Yeah, that
But
came
what
out.
he also said I found really interesting is, a certain kind of caution about exactly the pace at which they're going to continue to cut rates. And he was clear that they're moving away from sentences that he perceived to be giving forward guidance. So I think to your point, Joe, while he's pushing back on the thought that there's perversity in the markets and that inflation expectations are becoming maybe a little loosened, I certainly heard in his voice a sense that we will take this one day at a time. And
going
he said very
somewhere.
explicitly, they're not on automatic pilot growth rates.
It was only one day, Roger, and I don't know how much you can read into the reaction to the election results, but gold was trading at a series of new highs. Gold went up significantly, which seems odd if it's going to be inflationary. There are those watchers that
Okay,
say
you're going with me.
a highly
Don't wanna
irregular
go.
environment could be disinflationary or even deflationary. And maybe either at least counter some of the tariffs that they are put on. Maybe they won't even be some of them. Or maybe it's negotiating. But are you convinced that we are going to see highly